Today, we are diving into a really complex story. It's all about international politics, accusations of a major double standard, and a brutal, devastating conflict. And it's all being fueled by the very minerals that power our modern world. At the center of it all, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And they are pointing a finger directly at the European Union.
So let's start with this quote. It's a really powerful accusation from the DRC's top diplomat. I mean, this is a direct challenge, right? It's basically saying the EU's actions in one part of the world look completely different from its inaction in another. So what exactly is this double standard they're talking about? To really get a grip on this, you gotta look at how the European Union has handled two different major global crises. According to the DRC, the difference is just night and day. Okay, just look at this comparison. It really tells the whole story. On one side, you've got the EU's reaction to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We're talking massive, sweeping sanctions designed to really hurt Russia's war machine. But on the other side, for the conflict in the DRC, the response is described as, and I quote, very timid. It's just a few limited sanctions targeting a handful of people and groups. The contrast is pretty stark. And here's the bottom line. The DRC is convinced that Rwanda is actively fueling the horrific conflict inside its borders. So they look at the heavy-duty pressure the EU put on Russia, and then they look at the response to Rwanda, and they see a massive inconsistency. And that question, why, leads us to something really sensitive. So why the hesitation from the EU? Well, the DRC believes the answer lies in a huge minerals deal that was signed in 2024 between the EU and Rwanda. And this deal, well, it sits right at the messy intersection of European high-tech industry and African conflict. First off, let's be super clear about what we're talking about. Critical raw materials. These are literally the building blocks of our 21st century lives. You know, things like cobalt and lithium for electric car batteries, or tantalum for the smartphone in your hand and the computer you're using. They're absolutely essential for the EU's green energy goals and its entire tech sector. Without a steady supply, Europe's economic future is kind of at risk. And this right here, this is the real sticking point. This deal is all about securing that exact supply chain for Europe, coming directly from Rwanda. But here's the kicker. Even with all these accusations about Rwanda's role in the DRC conflict, the EU has flat out refused to suspend the agreement. It seems to be prioritizing its own strategic interests. The DRC's view on this is crystal clear. They're alleging that this deal is basically a pipeline for resources that have been plundered from their country. And they claim these minerals are being mined under the most horrific conditions you can imagine, including forced labor, even involving children, and then smuggled through Rwanda. All right, let's zoom in on the conflict itself and see how all this fits together. We really need to look at the evidence that's been presented on the world stage about Rwanda's alleged role in Eastern Congo. Now, this isn't just the DRC making stuff up. A United Nations expert group reported that thousands of Rwandan troops were fighting alongside the M23 rebels. That's a major armed group causing instability in the region. And get this, even the EU's own paperwork justifying its limited sanctions admits that the Rwandan Defense Force has violated DRC territory and is responsible for serious human rights abuses. But Rwanda's side of the story is completely different. They have consistently and forcefully denied every single one of these accusations. They insist they are not backing the M23 rebels. They argue that any military presence in the region is purely for self-defense, and that, frankly, the DRC just doesn't understand the real roots of the violence. So you have these high-level diplomatic efforts, right? There was even a peace deal signed at the White House. But the violence on the ground, it hasn't stopped. Deadly attacks on civilians are still happening. And that brings us to the absolutely devastating human cost of this whole geopolitical mess. Behind all the headlines about minerals and sanctions is one of the world's absolute worst humanitarian crises. The numbers we're about to see, honestly, they are hard to wrap your head around. Just think about that number for a second. 7.8 million people. That's more than the entire population of Switzerland. These are people forced to flee their homes, becoming refugees in their own country. Their lives have been completely turned upside down by this violence. And it just gets worse. On top of being driven from their homes, a staggering 28 million people are facing food insecurity. This isn't just about being hungry. It's about the total collapse of communities. 4 million of those people are at emergency levels. We're talking on the very brink of famine. And the violence is just relentless. That number, 1,087, that's how many people the UN confirmed were killed in just a 3-month span. That's more than 10 people killed every single day. This is not some distant, low-level thing. It's an active and incredibly deadly war zone for ordinary people just trying to survive.
So you take all of this, the accusation of a double standard, the desperate need for minerals, the brutal conflict, and this staggering human cost. And what do you get? You get a very, very complicated and troubling picture of global policy today. If there's one thing you should take away from all of this, it's the fundamental dilemma that not just the EU, but all major world powers are facing. You have these two things on a direct collision course. On one hand, you've got the need to secure resources for your economy and your tech, and on the other, you have this stated commitment to uphold human rights and international law.
And that right there is the central question this whole situation leaves us with. There are no easy answers, for sure, but it forces us to really think about the hidden costs and the complex moral choices behind the supply chains that power our phones, our cars, and our future. It really makes you ask, what is the true price we're paying for all this progress?